The blood-soaked letter trembled in Eleanor Norton's hands as she stood frozen on the porch of her small homestead. The Montana sunset, painting the vast prairie in hues of amber and gold that once reminded her of happiness. Now, the beautiful landscape only served to mock her grief. Her husband of just 8 months, Thomas, was dead, killed in a mining accident near Virginia City, while trying to make enough money to support their coming child. Eleanor pressed a hand to her still flat stomach, tears blurring her vision. 3 months along, she had only discovered her condition days before the letter arrived. Thomas would never know he was to be a father. The irony was almost unbearable. He had gone to the mines precisely to provide for their future, a future he would now never see. At 20 years old, Eleanor faced the harsh reality of being a widow in Montana Territory in 1876, with winter approaching and a child growing inside her. Her nearest neighbor was 2 miles away, and her small vegetable garden wouldn't sustain her through the coming months. The meager savings Thomas had left wouldn't last until spring. She had no family left in the East to return to. Her parents had both succumbed to influenza 3 years earlier, which had prompted her to answer the advertisement Thomas had placed for a bride. They had exchanged letters for 6 months before she made the journey west, marrying him the day after her arrival in Florence, Montana. As dusk settled over the land, Eleanor wiped her tears with determined fingers. She would need to be strong now, stronger than she had ever been. Tomorrow, she would ride into Florence and see what work might be available for a woman in her condition. The small town of Florence bustled with its usual morning activities, as Eleanor tied her mare to the hitching post outside the general store. She had put on her best dress, the blue calico that Thomas had always said brought out her eyes, though it hung a bit loose on her frame. Grief had stolen her appetite these past days. Inside, she found Mrs. Patterson arranging bolts of fabric. "Good morning, Mrs. Norton," the older woman said, her smile faltering as she noticed Eleanor's somber expression. "I heard about Thomas. I'm so sorry for your loss, my dear." Eleanor nodded, unable to speak for a moment. "Thank you. I actually came to ask if you might need help in the store. I'm in need of work." Mrs. Patterson's gaze was sympathetic, but hesitant. "I wish I could help, but business has been slow with the railroad bypassing us. I can barely afford to keep the store open myself." Similar responses met Eleanor at the schoolhouse, the hotel, and even the saloon, where the proprietor suggested work that made her cheeks burn with shame. By midday, exhaustion and hunger drove her to the small cafe near the center of town. The cafe was nearly empty when she entered, save for a man seated in the corner, his hat pulled low over his eyes. Eleanor ordered the least expensive item on the menu, a bowl of stew, and sat at a table near the window, watching the townspeople pass by. "Miss." Eleanor looked up to find a tall man standing beside her table. He removed his hat, revealing dark hair and striking blue eyes set in a sun-weathered face. She recognized him as one of the ranchers from outside town, Kieran Mitchell, though they had never been formally introduced. "Mr. Mitchell," she acknowledged with a slight nod. "I heard about your husband," he said, his voice deep and tinged with genuine sympathy. "My condolences." "Thank you," she replied, the words feeling hollow after repeating them so many times. He hesitated, then gestured to the empty chair across from her. "May I?" Eleanor nodded, curious about what this man, who she knew only by reputation, might want. Kieran Mitchell sat down, placing his hat on the table. At perhaps 30 years of age, he was the owner of the Flying M Ranch, one of the more successful cattle operations in the territory. Rumors around town suggested he had come west after the war between the states, a former Union soldier looking to build a new life. I understand you're looking for work, he said without preamble. Eleanor's eyes widened slightly. News traveled fast in Florence. Yes, I am. My housekeeper left 2 weeks ago to care for her ailing sister in Helena. I've been making do, but the house is suffering. His gaze was direct, honest. It's honest work, good pay, and there's a small cabin on the property where you'd have privacy. Eleanor considered his offer carefully. Working as a housekeeper for a bachelor would raise eyebrows, but she was a widow, not an unmarried girl, and her options were limited. That's very kind, Mr. Mitchell, but I should tell you something. She lowered her voice, glancing around to ensure they wouldn't be overheard. I'm with child. Thomas's child. I don't know how long I'll be able to work before. She trailed off, watching his expression. Most potential employers would withdraw their offer immediately upon learning this information. Kieran's blue eyes softened, but his expression remained unreadable for a long moment. Finally, he spoke. The offer stands, Mrs. Norton. The cabin would give you and your child a proper home, and I imagine you'd rather not be alone when your time comes. Relief washed over Eleanor, so intense she had to blink back tears. Thank you. I accept your offer. He nodded, all business now. I can send a wagon for your belongings tomorrow morning. The pay is $20 a month, plus room and board. It was generous, more than she had hoped for. That will be more than adequate, Mr. Mitchell. As they finalized the details, Eleanor felt the first flicker of hope since receiving the devastating news of Thomas's death. It wasn't the life she had planned, but it was a chance for her, and for her unborn child. The Flying M Ranch sprawled across 500 acres of prime Montana grassland, nestled against the foothills with a clear stream running through the property. As the wagon approached, Eleanor took in the impressive main house, a 2-story structure built of sturdy logs with a wide porch wrapping around 3 sides, several outbuildings, a large barn, and corrals filled with horses and cattle. The ranch hands, a group of about 10 men, paused in their work to watch as the wagon pulled up to the main house. Eleanor felt their curious stares and kept her gaze forward, her hands folded primly in her lap. Kieran Mitchell emerged from the barn as the wagon stopped, striding toward them with the easy confidence of a man comfortable on his own land. He helped Eleanor down from the wagon, his hands strong and steady. Welcome to the Flying M, Mrs. Norton. I hope the journey wasn't too taxing. Not at all, she assured him, though in truth, the bumpy wagon ride had left her feeling slightly nauseated. Morning sickness, it seemed, wasn't confined to mornings. I'll show you to your cabin first, then give you a tour of the main house and explain your duties. The cabin stood about 50 yards from the main house, close enough for convenience but far enough for privacy. It was small but well built, with a main room containing a stone fireplace, a small kitchen area, and a bedroom just large enough for a bed and a chest of drawers. Clean curtains hung at the windows, and the floors had been recently swept. It's lovely, Eleanor said, genuinely pleased. It was smaller than the homestead she had shared with Thomas, but it was tight against the elements and would be a good home for her and her child. I had the men freshen it up a bit, Kieran said, seeming pleased by her reaction. The previous housekeeper used it for storage. There's a pump out back and the outhouse is just beyond that. I've had firewood stacked beside the door. After showing her the cabin, Kieran led Eleanor to the main house. It was impressively built, but in sore need of a woman's touch. While not exactly dirty, there was a layer of dust on many surfaces, and the furniture arrangement suggested functionality rather than comfort. As you can see, I've been managing, but not very well, Kieran admitted with a wry smile. The kitchen is through there, the study on the right, and upstairs are 3 bedrooms, though I only use the master. He outlined her duties: cooking, cleaning, laundry, and general household management. The ranch hands take their meals in the bunkhouse, but I'd appreciate breakfast and dinner served here. Lunch is usually something simple I can take with me." "That seems reasonable," Eleanor agreed, already making mental notes of what needed immediate attention. "You can start tomorrow," Kieran said. "Take today to settle in. Your trunks should be in your cabin by now." As they walked back outside, Eleanor noticed a man watching them from near the corral older than Kieran, with graying hair and a weathered face that spoke of years under the harsh Montana sun. "That's Walt Simmons, my foreman," Kieran explained, following her gaze. "Been with me since I bought this place 6 years ago. Good man." Eleanor nodded politely in Walt's direction, receiving a tip of his hat in return. "Mr. Mitchell," she began hesitantly as they approached her cabin, "I want to thank you again for this opportunity. Not many would hire a woman in my condition." Kieran's expression softened slightly. "Everyone deserves a chance, Mrs. Norton, and please call me Kieran. Mr. Mitchell makes me feel like my father." Eleanor managed a small smile. "Then you must call me Eleanor." As he left her at her cabin door, Eleanor felt an unexpected sense of security. For the first time since Thomas's death, she felt the ground steady beneath her feet. The first weeks at the Flying M fell into a comfortable rhythm. Eleanor rose before dawn to prepare breakfast for Kieran, spent the mornings cleaning and organizing the main house, and afternoons cooking dinner and tending to her own small cabin. Though her pregnancy was still not outwardly visible to others, she felt the subtle changes in her body, the tenderness, the fatigue that sometimes overwhelmed her in the afternoons. Kieran proved to be a considerate employer. He never commented when she occasionally needed to sit down while preparing a meal, and he'd taken to bringing in firewood for her cabin without being asked. Their interactions remained polite and professional, though Eleanor noticed he seemed to linger a bit longer at breakfast each morning, their conversations extending beyond the days, tasks to books they had both read or news from town. It was during one such breakfast, nearly a month after her arrival at the Flying M, that Kieran surprised her. "I'll be heading into Florence today," he said, finishing his coffee. "Is there anything you need?" Eleanor considered. "Some fabric, if you wouldn't mind." "I should start preparing some things for the baby," he nodded, seemingly unbothered by the mention of her condition. "Write down what you need. Anything else? For yourself, perhaps?" The thoughtfulness of his question caught her off guard. "No, I don't believe so, but thank you." Kieran studied her for a moment. "You know, I've noticed you never speak of your husband." The observation, though gently made, caused Eleanor's hands to still as she gathered the breakfast dishes. "It's still painful," she admitted quietly. "Of course," he said, his voice softening. "I didn't mean to pry." Eleanor looked up at him, seeing genuine concern in his eyes. "It's all right. Thomas was a good man. We hadn't been married long, just 8 months before the accident. He went to the mines to save money for our future." Her hand drifted unconsciously to her stomach. "A future he'll never see." "How did you meet?" Eleanor felt a small smile tug at her lips despite the sad subject. "Through an advertisement. After my parents died, there wasn't much keeping me in Pennsylvania. Thomas wrote that Montana needed women with courage and kindness. He described the land so beautifully in his letters that I fell half in love before I ever saw it or him." Kieran's expression was thoughtful. "And when you arrived?" He was waiting at the stagecoach stop with wildflowers in his hand. "We were married the next day by the circuit preacher." Her eyes misted at the memory. "It was fast, but we were happy." A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only when Kieran stood to leave. "I'll be back before dark with your fabric." As promised, Kieran returned before sunset, a package wrapped in brown paper tucked under his arm as he knocked on Eleanor's cabin door. "I hope this will suit," he said, handing her the parcel. Inside, Eleanor found several yards of soft muslin, perfect for baby clothes, along with a length of blue cotton that matched her eyes. There was also a small paper bag containing ginger candies. "The shopkeeper's wife suggested these might help with morning sickness," Kieran explained, looking slightly embarrassed. Eleanor felt a rush of gratitude. "This is very thoughtful, thank you." As autumn progressed, the ranch prepared for winter. The cattle were moved to the lower pastures, the last of the hay was stored in the barn, and windows were checked for drafts. Eleanor found herself growing increasingly comfortable in Kieran's presence, looking forward to their conversations over meals. One evening in late October, as the first snow dusted the distant mountains, Eleanor was returning to her cabin after serving dinner when dizziness washed over her. She stumbled, dropping the lantern she carried. The glass shattered, and the flame flickered dangerously near the dry grass. "Eleanor." Kieran's voice seemed to come from far away as her vision narrowed to a pinpoint, then darkness claimed her. She woke to find herself lying on Kieran's sofa, a cool cloth on her forehead and his worried face hovering above her. "Thank goodness," he breathed when her eyes opened. "You fainted." Eleanor tried to sit up, embarrassment flooding her. "I'm so sorry." "The lantern is taken care of," he assured her, gently pressing her back down. "More importantly, are you all right? Should I ride for the doctor?" "No, that's not necessary. I just felt lightheaded suddenly." "It happens sometimes with—" She gestured vaguely at her middle, where the slight swell of her pregnancy was now visible beneath her dress. Concern etched lines around Kieran's eyes. "When did you last eat?" Eleanor thought back through her day. She'd been so busy preparing for winter that she'd forgotten lunch entirely. "Breakfast," she admitted reluctantly. Kieran's expression darkened. "Eleanor, you need to take better care of yourself, for the baby's sake if not your own." The gentle admonishment touched her more deeply than she expected. Thomas had never spoken of their child, having never known about it. Hearing Kieran's concern for the baby made her throat tighten with emotion. "You're right," she said softly. "I'll be more careful." He helped her sit up slowly, then disappeared into the kitchen, returning moments later with bread, cheese, and a cup of tea. "Eat," he instructed, sitting beside her. As she ate, Eleanor became acutely aware of their proximity, of the warmth of his body next to hers, of the faint scent of leather and pine that seemed to cling to him. For the first time since Thomas's death, she felt a flutter of something that wasn't grief in her chest. The feeling both comforted and frightened her. Winter descended upon Montana territory with a vengeance. December brought howling blizzards that confined everyone to their buildings for days at a time. During one such storm, Eleanor was working in the main house when the wind shifted, driving snow against the windows with such force she feared the glass might break. "It's getting worse," Kieran observed, coming in from checking the barn. Snow clung to his coat and hat, melting quickly in the warmth of the house. "I don't think you should try to make it back to your cabin tonight." Eleanor hesitated. Staying in the main house overnight would be improper, but the alternative, trying to navigate the 50 yards to her cabin in the blinding snow, seemed foolish. "You can take one of the upstairs bedrooms," Kieran added, seeing her uncertainty. "I promise to be a gentleman." Despite the circumstances, Eleanor felt herself blush. "Thank you. That would be best, I think." As the evening progressed, they sat before the fireplace in the main room, the storm raging outside. Kieran had produced a bottle of good whiskey, pouring himself a small amount while preparing hot tea for Eleanor. "May I ask you something personal?" Eleanor ventured after a comfortable silence had stretched between them. Kieran looked up, his expression open. "Of course." Why haven't you married? A successful rancher like yourself must have had opportunities. A shadow passed over his face. I almost did once, back in Pennsylvania before the war. What happened? Eleanor asked softly. Kieran swirled the amber liquid in his glass. Her name was Caroline. We were engaged when the war broke out. I enlisted with the Union, believing it would be over quickly. His jaw tightened. 3 years later, when I finally came home, she was married to my cousin, a man who'd found reasons not to fight. I'm sorry. He shook his head. It was a long time ago. After that, I decided to head west, make a fresh start. I bought this land, built this house. His gaze swept the room, but I never seemed to find the time for courting, or perhaps the right woman. The firelight played across his features, highlighting the strong line of his jaw, the tiny scar near his right eyebrow. Eleanor suddenly realized how handsome he was in a rugged, unassuming way. "What about you?" he asked, turning the conversation. "Will you stay in Montana after the baby comes?" The question caught Eleanor off guard. She had been so focused on surviving her pregnancy that she'd given little thought to what would come after. "I don't know," she admitted. "I have no family to return to in the East, but raising a child alone out here won't be easy." "You wouldn't have to be alone," Kieran said, his voice careful, measured. "There are good people here who would help." Eleanor wondered if he counted himself among those people. The thought warmed her more than the fire. As the blizzard continued through the night, Eleanor lay awake in the spare bedroom, listening to the wind howl around the eaves. Her baby moved within her, a gentle fluttering that never failed to fill her with wonder. In the darkness, she allowed herself to imagine a different future, one where she wasn't alone, where Kieran's kind eyes watched her child grow. It was a dangerous fantasy, she knew. Kieran had been nothing but kind to her, but kindness didn't mean love. And even if he did harbor feelings for her, she wasn't certain her heart was ready. Thomas had been dead barely 4 months. Still, as sleep finally claimed her, Eleanor's dreams were not of the past but of possibilities. Christmas approached, bringing with it a brief respite from the harsh weather. The ranch hands decorated the bunkhouse with pine boughs, and Eleanor found herself humming carols as she worked. On Christmas Eve, Kieran invited her to join him for dinner in the main house, promising a proper celebration. When she arrived, Eleanor was stunned to find the main room transformed. Candles glowed on every surface. A small pine tree stood in the corner, adorned with paper ornaments and popcorn strings, and the table was set with what appeared to be Kieran's best china. "This is beautiful," she breathed, taking in the scene. Kieran smiled, looking pleased with her reaction. "I thought we could use some cheer." The men helped with the tree. Dinner was a feast: roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, and for dessert, an apple pie that Eleanor had baked that morning. They ate by candlelight, sharing stories of Christmases past. Eleanor found herself laughing more than she had in months. After dinner, Kieran handed her a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with red string. "I know it's customary to wait until morning, but I wanted to give you this now." Inside, Eleanor found a beautiful wooden music box, intricately carved with flowers and birds. When she opened it, a sweet melody filled the room. "Kieran, it's exquisite," she said, deeply touched by the thoughtful gift. "I thought." "For the baby," he explained somewhat shyly. "Music helps little ones sleep, my mother always said." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you. I have something for you as well, though it's not nearly as fine." Her gift to him was practical: a knitted scarf in deep blue that matched his eyes, but Kieran received it as though she'd given him gold. "No one has made me anything by hand since my mother died," he said, wrapping it around his neck immediately. "It's perfect." As the evening came to a close, Kieran walked Eleanor back to her cabin. the moonlight casting long shadows on the fresh snow. At her door, they paused, an unfamiliar tension stretching between them. "Merry Christmas, Eleanor," Kieran said softly. "Merry Christmas," she replied, her heart beating strangely fast. For a moment, she thought he might lean down and kiss her. Instead, he reached out and gently squeezed her hand before turning to walk back to the main house. Eleanor watched him go, her fingers still tingling from his touch. January brought the coldest days Eleanor had ever experienced, with temperatures so low that breath froze in the air and water in the bucket by the door turned to ice overnight. Her pregnancy was now unmistakable, her dresses adjusted to accommodate her growing middle. Moving became more cumbersome, especially through the deep snow, and Kieran had taken to escorting her between the cabin and the main house, his strong arm always ready for her to lean on. One frigid morning, as Eleanor prepared breakfast, she felt a sharp pain in her side that made her gasp. "What is it?" Kieran asked, immediately alert to her distress. "Nothing," she assured him, pressing a hand to her side. "The baby is becoming quite active, that's all." Kieran looked unconvinced but didn't press the matter. Later that day, however, when the pain returned more intensely, Eleanor couldn't hide her discomfort. "I'm riding for the doctor," Kieran decided, his tone brooking no argument. "The baby isn't due for nearly 3 months," Eleanor protested. "And in this weather, precisely why I want him to check on you now, before the next storm makes travel impossible." Before she could argue further, Kieran had bundled her into the main house, settled her on the sofa with blankets, and instructed Walt to keep an eye on her while he rode the 10 miles to Florence to fetch the doctor. The pain subsided while Kieran was gone, leaving Eleanor feeling foolish for causing such a fuss. When he returned 4 hours later with Dr. Wilson in tow, she was up and preparing soup for dinner. "Mrs. Norton," the doctor greeted her, removing his snow-covered hat. "Mr. Mitchell here nearly rode his horse into the ground getting to me. Let's have a look at you, shall we?" After examining her in the privacy of one of the upstairs bedrooms, Dr. Wilson's expression was reassuringly calm. "The baby seems fine, Mrs. Norton. What you experienced was likely just the ligaments stretching to accommodate your growing child, common in pregnancy, especially first pregnancies." Relief washed over Eleanor. "So there's nothing to worry about." "I wouldn't say that," the doctor cautioned. "You're still quite far from your due date, and these Montana winters are harsh. I'd recommend taking it easy, staying warm, and having someone nearby at all times." When they rejoined Kieran downstairs, the doctor repeated his instructions. "She shouldn't be making that walk to the cabin alone, especially in the snow," Dr. Wilson advised. "A fall could be dangerous in her condition." Kieran nodded solemnly. "I understand. Thank you for coming out, doctor." After the doctor departed, promising to return in a few weeks to check on her progress, Kieran turned to Eleanor with a determined expression. "You should stay in the main house from now on," he said. "It's safer, and I can be close by if you need anything." Eleanor felt a flare of independence. "Kieran, I appreciate your concern, but I'm perfectly capable, please," he interrupted, his voice suddenly raw with emotion. "I couldn't bear it if something happened to you to either of you when I could have prevented it." The intensity in his eyes caught Eleanor off guard. This was more than an employer's concern for an employee. Much more. "All right," she agreed softly. "Until the baby comes, I'll stay in the main house." Relief spread across Kieran's face. "Thank you. I'll have Walt bring your things over tomorrow." That night, as Eleanor settled into the same bedroom she had used during the blizzard, she found herself contemplating the way Kieran had looked at her as if she and her unborn child were precious to him. The realization sent a warmth through her that had nothing to do with the crackling fire in the hearth. Living in the main house changed the dynamic between Eleanor and Kieran in subtle but significant ways. They now shared not just meals but quiet evenings by the fire, mornings over coffee, and countless small, domestic moments. Eleanor found herself watching Kieran when he wasn't looking, the way his brow furrowed when he was concentrating on ranch accounts, how his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled, the gentle way his hands moved when he built up the fire. By February, Eleanor's feelings had grown too strong to ignore. She was falling in love with Kieran Mitchell, and the realization terrified her. Her child would be born in less than 2 months, a permanent reminder of Thomas. How could she contemplate a future with another man when she carried her late husband's baby? Yet each day brought new evidence of Kieran's care. He had begun renovating one of the upstairs rooms into a nursery, bringing in a carpenter from town to build a cradle. He ordered books on childrearing from back east. And most telling of all, he spoke to her belly sometimes when he thought she was asleep, telling the baby stories about the ranch and promising to teach it to ride when it was old enough. One evening in late February, as a gentle snow fell outside, Eleanor sat mending one of Kieran's shirts while he read aloud from a book of poetry, a nightly ritual they had developed. The baby was particularly active, causing Eleanor to shift uncomfortably. Kieran paused in his reading. "Are you all right?" "Yes, just restless tonight," she replied, placing a hand on her swollen belly. "Would you like to feel—" The words were out before she could consider their impropriety. Kieran looked startled, then curious. "May I?" Eleanor nodded, and he moved to sit beside her on the sofa. Hesitantly, she took his hand and placed it on the spot where the baby was kicking. For a moment, nothing happened, then a strong movement caused Kieran to inhale sharply. "That's remarkable," he whispered, his face alight with wonder. Eleanor couldn't help but smile at his reaction. "It is, isn't it?" Kieran's hand remained on her belly, warm and steady, and the baby seemed to respond to his touch with more movements. They sat like that, connected by the miracle growing within her, until the baby finally settled. "Thank you," Kieran said softly, reluctantly withdrawing his hand. "I've never felt anything like that before." The intimacy of the moment hung between them, charged with unspoken emotions. Eleanor found herself unable to look away from Kieran's face, from the tenderness and something deeper reflected there. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, Kieran leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle, questioning, and over almost before it began. When he pulled back, uncertainty clouded his eyes. "Forgive me if I've overstepped," he began. Eleanor silenced him by placing her fingers against his lips. "You haven't," she assured him, her voice barely above a whisper. Relief washed over his features, followed by a smile that made her heart skip. He took her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "I know the timing is complicated," he said carefully, "and I would never presume to replace Thomas in your heart or in your child's life. But Eleanor, I've come to care for you deeply, for both of you." The honesty in his voice brought tears to Eleanor's eyes. "I care for you too, Kieran, more than I thought possible, but I'm afraid of what it means to feel this way when I'm carrying another man's child." Kieran's expression grew serious. "That child is a part of you, Eleanor. How could I not cherish it? Besides," he added with a gentle smile, "I've already grown rather attached to the little one." Eleanor felt as though a weight had lifted from her heart. "What are you saying, Kieran?" "I'm saying that when you're ready, whether that's a month from now or a year, I would be honored if you would consider becoming my wife. I want to build a life with you, Eleanor, with both of you." Tears spilled down Eleanor's cheeks, but they were tears of joy, not sorrow. "I think I would like that very much." Kieran kissed her again, this time with more assurance, and Eleanor felt the last of her reservations melt away. Whatever the future held, they would face it together. As March arrived, bringing with it the first hints of spring, Eleanor's time grew near. Dr. Wilson visited weekly now, pleased with her progress but cautioning that first babies often came late, especially in women who had been through emotional upheaval. Nature's way of making sure mother and child are truly ready, he explained. Eleanor and Kieran had agreed not to announce their understanding to others until after the baby was born, feeling it would be more respectful to Thomas's memory. But privately, they allowed their feelings to blossom, spending long evenings planning their future together. One night, as they sat before the fire, Eleanor asked a question that had been weighing on her mind. "Kieran, when the baby comes, what will it call you?" He considered this thoughtfully. "Whatever feels right to you. I would be honored if, someday, your child thought of me as a father. But I would never want to erase Thomas's memory." Eleanor nodded, touched by his sensitivity. "I was thinking perhaps we could name the baby after Thomas if it's a boy, as a middle name at least." "I think that would be very fitting," Kieran agreed, squeezing her hand. The following week, as a spring storm battered the ranch with heavy rain and wind, Eleanor woke in the pre-dawn hours to a sharp pain that took her breath away. She lay still, counting the minutes until it happened again. 20 minutes later, another pain gripped her, confirming what she suspected: her labor had begun. She rose carefully and made her way to Kieran's room, knocking softly on the door. He answered immediately, as though he hadn't been sleeping at all. "It's time," she said simply. The calm efficiency with which Kieran handled the situation impressed Eleanor. He helped her back to her room, built up the fire, and sent one of the ranch hands for Dr. Wilson, all without displaying the panic she half expected. "What else do you need?" he asked, his voice steady despite the worry in his eyes. "Just stay with me until the doctor arrives," she requested, another contraction building. "They're still far apart." Kieran sat beside her on the bed, holding her hand through each pain, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth, and speaking words of encouragement. By the time Dr. Wilson arrived 3 hours later, the contractions were coming every 10 minutes. "First babies take their time," the doctor assured them after examining Eleanor. "But everything looks to be progressing normally." As the day wore on, Eleanor's labor intensified. The pain became all-consuming, leaving little room for thought or conversation. Kieran never left her side, even when the doctor suggested he might want to wait downstairs. "I'm staying," he said firmly, his eyes never leaving Eleanor's face. By late afternoon, Eleanor was exhausted, the contractions now nearly continuous. "I can't do this," she gasped after a particularly brutal wave of pain. "You can," Kieran insisted, his voice fierce with conviction. "You are the strongest woman I know, Eleanor Norton, and I will be right here every step of the way." His unwavering faith gave her the strength to continue. As the sun began to set, Dr. Wilson announced it was time to push. Eleanor gripped Kieran's hand with crushing force as she bore down with each contraction, bringing her child closer to the world. "I can see the head," the doctor announced. "One more big push, Mrs. Norton." With a final, monumental effort, Eleanor felt her baby slip from her body. A moment of silence, then a lusty cry filled the room. "You have a son," Dr. Wilson announced, placing the squalling infant on Eleanor's chest. Exhausted but elated, Eleanor gazed down at her son, red-faced, wrinkled, and utterly perfect. "Hello, little one," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. Beside her, Kieran looked at the baby with awe, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "He's beautiful, Eleanor, just like his mother." After the doctor had cleaned and examined the baby, declaring him healthy and strong, he discreetly left them alone. Eleanor cradled her son, marveling at his tiny fingers and the wisp of dark hair on his head. "Would you like to hold him?" she asked Kieran. With reverent care, Kieran took the baby in his arms, his large hands making the infant appear even smaller. "What will you name him?" Eleanor had been considering names throughout her pregnancy. "William," she decided. "William Thomas Norton." "A fine name," Kieran approved, gently rocking the baby. As he gazed down at the child, his expression grew serious. "Eleanor, there's something I need to say." She looked up at him, suddenly anxious. "I love you," he said simply. "I think I have since the day you fainted in my yard." "And this little one?" He glanced down at the baby in his arms. "I already love him too." Emotion welled up in Eleanor's throat. "Kieran, let me finish," he said gently. "I know we agreed to wait, but seeing you bring this precious life into the world, I don't want to wait anymore. I want us to be a family, you, me, and William." Tears filled Eleanor's eyes once more. "I love you too, Kieran, more than I can say." Kieran carefully placed William back in her arms, then reached for her free hand, his expression solemn. "I know this isn't how you imagined your life would be," he said softly. "But I promise you, Eleanor, if you'll have me, I'll spend every day trying to make you and William happy." Eleanor looked down at her son, then back to the man who had become her rock, her hope, her future. "We would be honored to become your family, Kieran Mitchell." Relief and joy transformed Kieran's features. He leaned forward to kiss her forehead, then the top of William's downy head. "I'm carrying his child," she whispered, nodding toward the sleeping infant. Kieran's eyes shone with emotion as he replied, "Then I'll raise it as my own." In that moment, with her son in her arms and Kieran at her side, Eleanor knew that life had given her a second chance at happiness, one she would embrace with her whole heart. Spring blossomed across the Montana landscape, bringing with it new beginnings. 3 weeks after William's birth, Eleanor stood beside Kieran in the small church in Florence, exchanging vows before Reverend Thomas and a handful of witnesses, including Walt and Mrs. Patterson from the general store. William slept peacefully in a basket near the altar, unaware of the momentous occasion. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the Reverend declared. "You may kiss your bride." Kieran's kiss was tender and full of promise. As they turned to face their small gathering of well-wishers, Eleanor felt a surge of gratitude for the twists of fate that had brought her to this moment. Later, as they drove back to the ranch, now truly her home, Eleanor looked out at the land stretching before them, green with new growth and possibility. "Happy?" Kieran asked, his arm around her shoulders. "Very," she assured him, leaning into his embrace. "Though I still can't believe you managed to plan a wedding while helping me care for a newborn," he chuckled. "I had help. Walt's wife was quite eager to assist, especially with the cake." At the ranch, they were greeted by the hands who had decorated the main house with wildflowers and ribbons. A small celebration followed, with music from a fiddle and guitar, dancing in the yard, and plenty of food and drink. William was passed from admiring arms to admiring arms, everyone remarking on what a fine boy he was. As dusk fell, Eleanor stood on the porch of the main house, her house now, watching Kieran thank the last of their guests. William was asleep against her shoulder, his warm weight a constant reminder of the miracle of life. Kieran joined her, sliding an arm around her waist. "Mrs. Mitchell," he said, testing the name on his tongue. Eleanor smiled up at him. "I think I like the sound of that." "As do I." He kissed her temple, then gazed down at the sleeping baby. "Let's put this little fellow to bed, shall we?" Together, they climbed the stairs to the nursery that Kieran had so lovingly prepared. The cradle stood near the window, a mobile of carved wooden animals hanging above it, another of Kieran's thoughtful gifts. Eleanor gently laid William down, covering him with a soft blanket. "Sweet dreams, my love," she whispered, brushing a kiss against his forehead. Kieran placed his hand on the edge of the cradle, his expression thoughtful. "I was thinking," he began, his voice low so as not to wake the baby, "that perhaps we should give him a brother or sister someday." "Not right away," he added hastily, "but when you're ready." Eleanor's heart swelled with love for this man who had accepted her and her child so completely. "I would like that very much," she agreed. A house full of children running through these halls, learning to ride horses, helping with the ranch. Driving their mother to distraction, Kieran added with a grin. "And their father too, I imagine," Eleanor countered, smiling up at him. Kieran's expression grew serious once more. "Do you think, will William ever know about Thomas?" "Of course," Eleanor replied without hesitation. "When he's old enough to understand, I'll tell him about his father, about the good man who loved us enough to work himself to the bone trying to provide for us." "But Kieran," she added, taking his hands in hers, "you will be the father he knows, the one who teaches him to ride and fish and be a good man. You will be the one he runs to when he scrapes his knee or has a nightmare." Relief softened Kieran's features. "I'll do my best to deserve that honor." "You already do," Eleanor assured him, rising on tiptoe to kiss him. As summer settled over Montana territory, life at the Flying M Ranch fell into new rhythms. William grew stronger each day, his personality emerging in little coos and smiles that delighted his parents. Eleanor embraced her role as mistress of the ranch, no longer just a housekeeper but a partner in all aspects of the operation. Kieran proved to be a devoted father, spending time with William each evening, reading to him from the same books of poetry he had once read to Eleanor, singing old lullabies in his deep baritone. The sight of her large, strong husband cradling their tiny son never failed to move Eleanor deeply. One warm July evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, William asleep in his basket nearby, Eleanor broached a subject she had been considering for some time. "I've been thinking about William's legal status," she began carefully. Kieran turned to her, his expression curious. "In what way?" "I want him to have your name," Eleanor said. "I want him to be a Mitchell, not a Norton." Surprise flickered across Kieran's face, followed by deep emotion. "Eleanor, are you sure? Thomas was his father." "Yes, and I will never let William forget that." "But you are the father who will raise him, who will shape the man he becomes." She took Kieran's hand, her voice steady with conviction. "In all the ways that truly matter, he is your son, Kieran." Tears gathered in Kieran's eyes, a sight so rare that Eleanor felt her own eyes grow moist in response. "I would be honored," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Truly honored." The necessary legal papers were drawn up the following week, and William Thomas Mitchell became the official name of their son. That evening, as they celebrated with a special dinner, Kieran proposed a toast. "To our family," he said, raising his glass. "May it grow and prosper with each passing year." Eleanor clinked her glass against his, happiness bubbling within her like fine champagne. "To our family," she echoed. The years that followed brought both joy and challenges to the Mitchell family. The Flying M prospered under Kieran's careful management, expanding to include neighboring properties when they became available. Eleanor proved to be a shrewd business partner, her head for figures complementing Kieran's practical knowledge of ranching. William grew into a sturdy, curious boy with his mother's blue eyes, and a temperament that seemed to combine the best of both his father's Thomas's gentle nature and Kieran's determined spirit. When he was 3, he gained a sister, Sarah Elizabeth Mitchell, who arrived during a thunderstorm and announced her presence with a cry that could rival the thunder. "She has your spirit," Kieran teased Eleanor as they gazed down at their red-faced daughter. "And your stubbornness," Eleanor retorted with a tired smile. 2 years later, James Kieran Mitchell joined the family, completing their brood and ensuring the house was never quiet for long. Through it all, Eleanor and Kieran's love deepened and matured, weathering the storms that came their way, a severe drought that threatened the cattle, a bout of scarlet fever that nearly took Sarah from them, the occasional disagreements that are inevitable in any marriage. On the eve of their 10th wedding anniversary, as they sat on the porch of the home they had built together, expanded now to accommodate their growing family, Eleanor reflected on the journey that had brought them to this point. "You ever regret it?" she asked softly, leaning against Kieran's shoulder as they watched their children play in the yard. William, now 11, was showing his younger siblings how to lasso a wooden practice post. Taking in a pregnant widow, taking on another man's child as your own. Kieran turned to look at her, his face lined now with a decade of Montana sun and wind, but his blue eyes still as bright and clear as the day they met. "Not for a single moment," he said with absolute certainty. "You and the children are the greatest blessings of my life, Eleanor." She smiled, knowing the truth of his words by the love that had never faltered in his eyes when he looked at her or at William. "Mine too." From inside the house came the chiming of the clock, reminding Eleanor that dinner would need to be started soon. But she lingered, savoring the moment, the golden evening light, the sound of her children's laughter, the solid presence of the man beside her. Life had not turned out as she had once planned. Back when she was a young bride stepping off the stagecoach in Florence with dreams of building a life with Thomas. But as Kieran drew her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple, Eleanor knew that sometimes life's most unexpected turns led to the most beautiful destinations. In the distance, William let out a whoop of triumph as his lasso settled around the practice post. Kieran chuckled with pride. "That boy's a natural. Gets it from his father." Eleanor smiled, knowing Kieran meant himself and finding nothing but joy in that knowledge. Thomas had given her William, a precious gift she would always cherish. But Kieran had given her a family, a home, and a love that had healed her broken heart and made her whole again. "I love you, Kieran Mitchell," she said simply. "And I love you, Eleanor Mitchell," he replied, sealing the words with a kiss as the Montana sunset painted the sky in shades of promise.